We hope you enjoy today's story. I thought I was ready for this moment, but the emotional toll hit harder than I anticipated. The disregard, the disrespect, it was like a slow poison seeping through the cracks of our marriage. It felt as if she had already mentally checked out, contemplating another romance. Or perhaps she was simply exhausted from the roles and responsibilities of being my wife. It seemed like I was gradually accepting the loss of her. Over the past few months, it was becoming almost too easy for her to detach. What baffled me was why she hadn't just left. Why prolong the agony? Just say goodbye and move on with your life. I hadn't transferred any money because we didn't have much. We lived in a debt-free house, but that was only because it was my grandmother's place, and we had moved in after her passing. I had seen warning signs back then, and, just to be cautious, had talked to my parents. They agreed to put the house in their name for at least a year, a safety measure. We had our own house, a bank account, and had lived there for 6 years before Sandy, one fateful evening, drank too much wine, fell asleep, and left dozens of candles burning. One candle was too close to the curtains. The fire alarm jolted her awake, but by then, the living room was already ablaze. The firefighters arrived just as I did, ready to tackle the flames. I told them about the collection of weapons and ammunition I kept, and when a few shots rang out, they retreated to a safe distance, letting the house burn. One of my best friends, the captain at the station, noted that there was no clause about infidelity in the insurance policy. We received a clean payout of around $30,000, more than I expected. We took the money and moved to my grandmother's house. With about $20,000 left, Sandy would get half, a decent sum to start anew. I stayed put. I had made a few arrangements, and if we did part ways, she would be quite disappointed. I anticipated this situation, but the calmness with which it unfolded was unsettling. Working the night shift, my hours differed from hers. It was winter, and the darkness outside was thick. Noticing her car was missing from the garage and the porch light was off, I called out her name as I entered the house. There was no answer. I found her at the vanity, applying makeup. She was wearing a new LBD, a little black dress, one I hadn't seen before, with a higher hem and a lower neckline. I watched her silently for a few moments as she pretended not to notice me. "Are we going somewhere?" I asked. "No," she replied. "I have an appointment." She was bracing for an explosion that never came. I simply continued to watch her, making her increasingly uncomfortable. "Did you hear me? I said I have an appointment. I'm meeting another man." "No," I said calmly. "What?" I said no. No means no. You can meet anyone you want, sleep with anyone you want, but only after you move out. I'll file the papers as soon as I can, but you won't do this while we live under the same roof. Pack a few things and stay somewhere else for a few days. I need time to sort everything out, and then we can discuss how to divide our belongings." Her laughter sounded almost mocking. "I won't leave. You will. I like this house, and when it becomes mine, I'll decorate it however I like. If you prove you're a cuckold, I'll get a bigger share of the money when we sell it. Do us both a favor. Move back in with your parents until this is all over." I said firmly, "You need to leave. Oh, I'm planning to in about 30 minutes. Don't come back when I'm gone, or I'll call the police. I'm sure I can come up with something to get you thrown out. I've heard they'll hold you for 48 hours for domestic violence. By then, I'll have changed the locks and gotten a restraining order." She was visibly shaken when I smiled. "Whatever you think, don't do it. I'm serious, Henry. This is final. You're overstepping now. Life is tough, and then it gets tougher. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish applying this lipstick. This bright red has to be the perfect shade. It should complement the ring around the base of his tool. What do you think?" I just smiled and left the bedroom. I knew she didn't have the courage to ask him to pick her up, which meant she was planning to meet him. I walked through the garage and grabbed an aluminum baseball bat I used in the summer. I took care of her car's front and rear lights. She wouldn't be driving it anytime soon. Returning to the kitchen, I noticed her purse on the counter. I opened it, finding 6 packs of rubber bands before pulling out her phone. Not wanting to tidy up, I took it to the garage, removed the battery, and smashed it with a hammer into 3 pieces. I reassembled the phone without the battery and tossed it back into her purse. I almost tampered with the bobby pins in the rubber bands, but stopped, considering she might claim they were mine. She walked into the kitchen as I poured myself a cup of coffee, wearing the tallest stilettos I had ever seen. When she saw me, she scowled. "Out!" she demanded, pointing at the door. I simply smiled and sipped my coffee. She sighed in frustration. "Fine, if you want it that way. Look for police officers soon. Maybe you'll need to call your dad to get money as collateral when you leave." I took another sip of coffee. "Why bother calling the cops? I haven't threatened you, nor have I raised a hand against you. All I've done is refuse to be kicked out of my own house. It's not about the cops. You threatened me when I asked for a divorce and insulted me. I fear for my life." They always believe the woman. "I'm not joking, Henry. You have about 30 minutes before I call." She paced back and forth, her stilettos clicking on the floor. 5 minutes later, her yelling echoed through the door. When she burst in, her expression made me uneasy. "You monster! What have you done to my car?" she screamed. "I didn't do anything to your car," I said calmly. "You shouldn't have left it parked on the street like that." She glared at me, her eyes filled with anger. "Don't play dumb. I'm calling him to come get me. I'll even let you see me kiss him when I leave. Don't be surprised if you don't see me again after we're gone." I chuckled, enjoying the moment of making her nervous. "Sure, call him. It'll give us a chance to get to know each other better. I can tell him what a lunatic you can be. Hopefully, he doesn't have any long-term plans because you're showing him that marriage vows mean nothing to you." Her voice rose as she realized her phone wasn't working. Fuming, she stormed back into the garage. "Have a nice evening," I said, smiling. "You piece of crap. You'll get what's coming to you, you monster." Her shouts continued as she walked down the street. I watched her bang on the first door, only to be turned away. She must have repeated this several times before realizing no one was going to help her. "Thank you, Mom," I called my mother, who alerted all the neighbors. I was well liked on this street. Sandy, on the other hand, was not. I knew she would eventually return, so I waited patiently. It took about 20 minutes for the police to arrive. One of the officers, a girl I graduated high school with, was among them. I invited them in and offered coffee. They seemed apprehensive. "Let me guess, you're here about a domestic disturbance call. See the broken furniture, scratches on the door frames, torn clothing?" I asked. They nodded. "So why do you think there was any disturbance?" I asked. "She said you threatened her, Henry. Said you were going to ruin her life when she told you she was leaving." "I'm sorry, Henry, but the law is clear. We have to arrest you." "God, this sounds serious. How serious is making false accusations?" I asked. The male officer spoke up. "If you have any evidence of this, now would be the time to show us." I showed them a video taken with my phone. Both officers frowned. "Well then, that gives you a lot of options, Henry. False testimony isn't up to you. It depends on us. However, you can use the video to get a restraining order. You can clearly hear her saying, 'You'll get yours.' A clear threat. Looks like you both need to keep your distance for now. You can file the application tomorrow and use our names as evidence. In the meantime, if you can secure the house so she can't return, that might be wise. If she does come back, give us a call. And Henry, I remember how sweet you were when someone wronged you. Let's keep this civil, okay? Let it go to court and be done with. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am, Sergeant." "Oops, sorry. I know no one's called you that since middle school. Old habits, you know? Anyway, I'll make a note that we'll investigate Sandy's false claims. If she makes any more attempts, we'll come straight to you. The neighbors will back you up." "I appreciate it. Thank you." As the officers left, I settled down, relieved the worst was over. I was now ready for the next chapter of my life. The following day, I was determined to move forward with my plans. With the restraining order in place and the house secured, I needed to focus on rebuilding and starting fresh. I went to work, keeping my interactions as professional and distant as possible. My colleagues noticed my change in demeanor, but offered no questions, probably assuming I was dealing with personal issues. The days went by in a blur of routine. I took extra shifts, hoping to keep myself occupied and avoid dwelling on the drama at home. But the nights were the hardest. The quiet of the house felt hollow, a stark reminder of the chaos that had erupted. I kept myself busy, trying to ignore the emptiness of Sandy's absence. Then, one evening, while I was working late, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was full of concern. "Henry, there's something you need to know. Sandy's been coming around, asking neighbors for help. She's trying to get back into the house." My heart sank. Despite the restraining order, it seemed Sandy was still bent on causing trouble. "Thanks for letting me know, Mom. I'll keep an eye out. Just make sure to call the police if she shows up again." "Will do," she assured me. As soon as I got home, I checked the security cameras and saw Sandy pacing near the driveway. Her frustration was palpable, and I could see her pleading with the neighbors through the footage. I felt a pang of sympathy, but quickly dismissed it. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to focus on my own path. The following week, I made arrangements to put the house on the market. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was necessary. The house had too many memories, and it was time for a new beginning. I contacted a real estate agent and began preparing for the sale. Meanwhile, Sandy seemed to have disappeared from the neighborhood. The police had warned her about the consequences of violating the restraining order, and it looked like she was laying low. I hoped this was a sign she was ready to move on with her life. One evening, as I was sorting through old files and papers, I found a letter from Sandy. It was postmarked from a city a few hundred miles away. My heart raced as I opened it. The letter was filled with apologies and regrets. Sandy expressed her sorrow for the pain she had caused and her realization of how she had failed us both. She mentioned that she was starting anew and wished me well. I read the letter several times, trying to make sense of it. Part of me wanted to respond, to acknowledge her feelings and offer closure, but another part of me knew that responding might only complicate things further. I decided to keep the letter, but not to reply. The past was behind me, and it was time to focus on the future. A few months later, the house sold, and I used the proceeds to secure a small apartment. It was a modest space, but it felt like a fresh start. I spent the first night in my new home reflecting on everything that had happened. Despite the challenges, I felt a sense of liberation. The weight of the past was lifting, and I was finally free to move forward. As I settled into my new routine, I found solace in the simple things. I took long walks in the park, reconnected with old friends, and even started picking up hobbies I had neglected. Each day brought new opportunities, and I embraced them with open arms. One evening, as I was finishing dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a young woman standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers. She introduced herself as Emma, a neighbor who had heard about my recent move. "I thought I'd come by and welcome you to the neighborhood," she said with a warm smile. Her kindness was unexpected, and I was grateful for the gesture. We chatted for a while, and I found myself enjoying her company. It was a small step, but it felt significant. As I closed the door and placed the flowers on the table, I realized that life had a way of surprising us. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with hope and resilience. The past was behind me, and the future was full of possibilities. I began to see new rays of light in my life. In the early days at the new apartment, I felt like I was being reborn. The old habits were replaced with fresh activities and new friends. Emma, the kind neighbor, had become a treasured friend. We often met and talked about life, dreams, and the bay. One evening, as we sat drinking tea and discussing future plans, Emma suggested I join an art class she was attending. "I know you love painting, and this is a great chance for you to try it out." I hesitated for a moment, but then decided to accept the offer. It turned out to be a wise decision. The art class not only helped me find relaxation, but also reignited the creative passion I had. Work also became more enjoyable. I was assigned new, challenging projects and had the opportunity to work with talented colleagues. Every day at the office, I felt excited and eager. Meanwhile, Sandy no longer appeared in my life. I received no further contact from her, and it was a relief. It seemed Sandy had genuinely begun a new chapter. A year later, I hosted a small party to celebrate my new life. Friends, colleagues, and the neighbors I had met over time all came to join the celebration. Emma and a few friends from the art class helped organize the event. It was a joyful. As the party ended and everyone had gone home, I stood alone in the apartment, looking around with contentment. I felt as if I had we. Sitting down and looking out the window at the city lights shimmering under the starlit sky, I realized that I had found peace. Life was no longer a series of failures and pain, but a journey. The following months brought unexpected changes. My newfound confidence began to reflect in other areas of my life. I decided to embark on a personal project that I had always dreamed of, writing a book. It was something I had put off for years, but the creativity I discovered in the art class inspired me to take the plunge. I set up a small workspace in a corner of my apartment, filled with notepads, pens, and a laptop. Every evening after work, I dedicated a few hours to writing. It was challenging, but immensely rewarding. The process of creating characters, weaving plots, and expressing my thoughts on paper was therapeutic. My book slowly took shape, and I began to feel a sense of purpose and fulfillment that I hadn't felt in a long time. I joined a local writing group to share my work and receive feedback. The group was supportive and provided valuable insights that helped me improve my writing. One day, while I was deep in writing, I received a message from Emma. She wanted to meet up and discuss an exciting project she had in mind. I was intrigued and agreed to meet her at a cafe we often frequented. When we met, Emma shared her idea of opening a community art center. She envisioned a place where people could come together to explore their creativity and connect with others. She asked if I would be interested in helping her with the project. I was thrilled by the prospect and eagerly agreed to be involved. The project gave me a renewed sense of purpose. Together with Emma and a group of dedicated volunteers, we worked tirelessly to bring the art center to life. It became a vibrant hub for artists and creatives, offering workshops, exhibitions, and events. As the art center flourished, so did my own sense of achievement. My book was completed and published, receiving positive reviews from readers and critics alike. It felt surreal to see my work in bookstores and to hear from people who connected with my story. Through it all, I learned that life's challenges often lead to unexpected and beautiful outcomes. The pain and betrayal from the past had paved the way for new opportunities and personal growth. I realized that embracing change and pursuing passions could transform even the most difficult situations into something meaningful. Looking back, I saw how far I had come, from the heartache of the past to a life filled with creativity, friendship, and fulfillment. I had found my place and purpose, and it was more than I had ever imagined. As I stood in the art center, surrounded by people celebrating their creative achievements, I knew that my journey was far from over. Life was an ever-evolving adventure, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next with open arms and an open heart.